So welcome, Julie. Thank you for sitting down to talk to me. I was hoping today to talk about, your involvement with the St. John's ice hockey team. We have our offices in the same building, and I don't know if the picture is still up there, but there's a picture of the team on your office door, and I've long wanted to ask you about that and the role that ice hockey plays in your life. But I thought we would start by sort of framing it with a bigger question. Reading this fall War and Peace with my senior seminar, there are clearly many graphic war scenes in that book, but the scene that I was actually thinking about was a scene of the hunt. So when Nikolai, the middle brother, or the older brother, I suppose, in the Rostov family, sort of is taking time away from being a soldier, and he and his father and a bunch of family go on this early morning hunt. And there's this description of the hunt that is very much like the description we get earlier in the book, some of the generals who are sort of organizing the plans for a battle scene. And so it got me thinking about, and I think we often, if we sort of probe into sports, particularly team sports, the comparison between war and team sports comes up. So really, though, to make this a little more complicated right from the beginning, that comparison is sort of there for us, I think, in more than War and Peace. Certainly in the Iliad and in other things we read, we're drawn to think about the relationship between war and sports. But having watched my puppy recently sort of romping around and playing, and it got me thinking about what looks, she'll track down sort of lizards or whatever, crickets around here in the desert, and she in some ways is being predatory, right? She's gonna go, and if she catches them, she'll probably eat them. But she's so joyful and playful, and the real thing that's going on there looks like play to me. And so it got me wondering whether the comparison between war and sports gets us where we need to go. I wanted to think about with you from the beginning, sort of play, and whether there's something about play, maybe even more or in relation to that idea of the predatory or the warlike. Can we dig into that a little bit?
In terms of whether when I'm out on the ice, it's a war or it's play.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's interesting to think about what ice hockey is, because there's two teams and they're going against one another, but it's also an occasion for me, I know it's going to sound strange, for joy, I think, because we're really out there being in ourselves, being focused, being centered in ourselves. And the sort of competition that we're having is one where we're both competing with ourselves because you're trying to be the best you can be, but also you're competing with someone one-on-one, and you're learning about that person. And so you're sort of allowed to be who you are, and you're allowing them to be who they are out there on the ice. And sometimes it turns into a character of perhaps, we are combatants and battling, but more so it's just that we're so focused on each other's movement and that sort of thing that I think it is more the idea of play and the focus that play brings rather than battle and war.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I think, because one of the things that happens in War and Peace is that the expectation of war, particularly among the young soldiers, they're sort of ready for action and excited to get in there. And they come out deeply sort of disillusioned that what had felt like they were going to show their stuff, which is similar to, I think, the idea of competing with yourself and wanting to be the best you can be. Right. But they're going to show their stuff, and then, sort of their horse gets shot and they get trapped
Right.
underneath the horse and haven't even seen any action
Right.
and suddenly are suffering. And it makes me really wonder about, so the frame around this team sports, around the ice hockey, that you show up and it's a joyful moment, both for probably the teams and also for spectators. Like there's
Right.
something really exciting.
Right.
Is the frame of the sports important for that to happen? I mean, I think we could think of the sports as sort of the artificial version of what actually happens on the battlefield. But there's ways in which the disillusioned soldier thought that the war was going to be something more like play.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be something really inarticulable.
Yeah. And I think the difference for me is when I read War and Peace and I see how someone on the battlefield is reacting to what's happening, suddenly they become very self-conscious. Maybe this is happening to me. Oh no, I wasn't expecting to be lying on my back on the ground looking at the sky and that sort of thing. Whereas when you're playing hockey, I really do think that you are in the moment, you're feeling the sort of the wholeness of the whole group on the ice, and you're part of a whole. You're not one sort of individual, but you're actually moving as a whole with all the other team members and things like that. And so you're getting, I think, a better sense of, the only word I can think of is fulfillment. You're fulfilled in the group itself. There's nothing that's that, nothing shocking like that. You're totally in the moment. In fact, one way I think about it is that you're not playing the game's playing you. And you are just, part of a whole that's moving in space. And that feeling, it makes you greater than yourself, I think, is, for me, the difference between hockey or a battle or something that.
And do you think that we would, when we think about play, so I think back to my puppy and this sort of, there is a striving there. It's also with little kids who like soccer or whatever, you can watch them just sort of like, the ball is out there and they want to go for it. There's something compelling about wanting to capture but you've used the word focus a lot, that there's this focus and this idea of the whole. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
But can we connect that to play? And I'm wondering about play. I'm wondering about, I think I started from this image of the dog and this idea of something that is dancing before the dog and her desire to capture it and pin it down. And my experience playing, I played a lot of team sports through college too. And there's something about that, I just love it. Like I wanna get the ball. I don't know why. But wondering a little bit about the focus part, I think, is also right. That makes a lot of sense to me. What can we think about the relationship between that feeling and just what are we doing when we're playing? Sorry, that's a hard one.
That's a difficult. I mean, so I was always the goalie, right? And on the hockey team for the St. John's team. And so I have, as the goalie, I have to be engaged. It's not just me and the puck. It's me and everybody else out on the ice. Yeah. And so I have to kind of keep track of where everyone is on the ice. And so I don't know if that's so much like your dog being focused on bugs or something like that, but I really, truly have to engage a part of myself that sort of feels like it's, sensing where I am in space, who's around me, where's my teammate, where's the other team, and that sort of stuff. So it's not sort of an engagement of the thing like the ball, or in your case, or the puck in my case, but it's an engagement of the other people that are there, and I'm really trying to make sure I know where they all are at the same time.
Does it have an abstract? I mean, so on the one hand, it feels like thinking through or engaging with your space in that kind of very focused way. Abstract might be the wrong word, but that's the way I'm thinking about it right now. Sort of being able to see the rink before you and what's going on. But on the other hand, there's something so bodily about, well, just playing the sport. And even when you talk about the focus, it feels almost like a physical space that you enter when you're, so what is the relationship between the abstract and the body? And
well, for me, and this, goes back also, I think I was a gymnast in college as well. So it goes back to sort of being, I like to say, being physics. You become physics out there, so you just really become something that's being moved in space and time. And you do get the sensual, well, it is a sensual awareness, not only of what's all around you, but I also know what's behind me without even, I can just sort of feel what's there behind me at the same time. So it is a sort of you're in a moment in, not only in space, but also in time. It's a wonderful feeling just to feel like you're a part of the world in that way. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was whether that the sensation of the groupness, but also this focus, given what we do at St. John's in the classroom, in some ways it's a big stretch because we're reading and thinking and talking, and one might argue that's all about sort of thought and not body. But does it overlap at all, the description that you
Definitely does, because if I am sitting in a seminar, a classroom, and I suddenly become incredibly self-conscious, I lose track of the conversation. Everything that we've set up to that point, after that, I really feel that I have to stay focused in that moment with the discussion, listening carefully. It is very much. That's why I don't want to think about what I do in the classroom as me directing the conversation. I know we use those words sometimes, but it's more that I'm just in tune with the conversation. I'm listening to the students. I'm moving with the thought as it moves around, and I'm keeping a sense of it as a whole. I think that's, again, wholeness is very important to me, so I have a feeling that there's a whole conversation that we're having, and there's not somebody who's not a part of it at the table. I'm always, I don't know if this happens for you, but I'm always kind of aware of maybe someone who's not in tune with the conversation, and I sort of want to speak to that person at that moment and say, oh, well, what do you think, and that sort of thing. So the focus is, I think, that's similar to what we do in St. John's in conversation.
Yeah, when you describe it that way about the student who might not be talking, that does have a bodily feel to me. When I think about being at the seminar table, there is something, especially about that is, like you might be feeling your way. Your position on a field. It is about bodies as much as it is about the thoughts that are being expressed.
Yeah, I think so. And you want to try to tie that person in somehow to the conversation. Because otherwise, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good analogy from hockey. I mean, what it would be like if you just had some person who was, skating around at one end of the rink doing nothing or something like that. So you want everyone to be involved.
So we've kind of been focusing on, and it seems important to me, and I think not always intuitive, that the kind of joyfulness and unity in playing team sports, and for you in ice hockey. I think we may have talked about this as like the social contract that goes on, that we come together, sort of loving each other, even the opposing team, in order to do this thing, which may then include, usually does, competition, ambition, these sort of more warlike things. But it does seem like there's an interesting tension there in the way we're thinking through. We have on the one hand this wholeness and groupness, and on the other hand the individual, the ambition, and it may be the case that they're mutually constituted, that that's what makes what happens in sports so compelling. But how do we think about that that tension
between the wholeness of all of us together on the ice and then the combativeness of? You reminded me of once when I was playing with the St. John's team. There are on many hockey teams men, and these were co-ed teams, but men who pretty much think that with a female goalie, all they need to do is just take you out with one shot. And that's what they're trying to do. And it reminded me of one of the students who was on our hockey team, St. John's team, who saw this going on, and he was like, Achilles or someone. He came in and just was defending me, standing in front of the net, and I was like, come, bring it, that sort of thing. So there is that aspect of it too, where you really find that there's, I don't know, there's a certain honor that is happening, amongst the groups, and you're not going to just sit back and let, just anybody, walk all over your team, or particularly your goalie, but you're going to actually do battle. And I'm thinking about how those two ideas are related. Is that the question that you have, this sort of coming together as, combatants and really standing up for one another on a field of honor, and then also the sort of also learning to work as a team and doing that. It's a very interesting tension that's happening, because you can go overboard with that. I mean, you could definitely become incredibly angry, and fights do break out. And hockey games, I know it comes as a shock to you, but fights do happen at hockey games. Yeah, so the two are sort of in tension. But what intrigues me just thinking about it is it always backs down. It never turns into this thing where the whole game just stops and you don't go on. There are these ways in which these things really sort of, it just settles, and you just go on with what's happening in the moment. So I'm not quite sure how to bring those two ideas together. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. What's striking me right now is the idea that how frequently I think we think of the sports as a kind of analog for war, but I think we put sports in quotations. It's the derivative of war that is sort of what we take this instinct and we pull it into society in a way that we can manage it.
Right.
But I'm increasingly, I want to flip that and say, actually, maybe there's something about the tension, about the simultaneous social contract and sort of love for each other and wholeness, and the competition and the playing out that is more primary. There's something about that captures what we really want, where what happens, going back to War and Peace, is the disillusionment of, I thought I wanted this thing, that some instinct in me thought I wanted to display my honor, and I think it happens in Homer too, the kind of radical grotesqueness of the battle scenes, where on the one hand you're getting the vaunting, soldier who has vanquished his opponent, and the excitement of that I think is there, but the really graphic descriptions of what's happening to their bodies is right alongside that. So we're never really permitted by Homer to simply get the high of the vanquished, and that idea seems to be called into question a little bit. And I guess that's what I'm wondering now about calling it into question, whether there's something about play and the framedness of it and this doubleness which might get more at what this human instinct is, what it is that we're doing. Maybe it requires both, and it's not just that we're kind of
cooperating, but there's also has to be a way in which I am showing my very best what I can do. I think that's really, really true on the ice. When you're playing the game, you really are trying to play. Especially, you want to win. You want, that team, the picture on my door, that team won the championship that year. We're sitting there with the trophy, and we are really happy about that. So you do want, it's not, we're not there just to be out on the ice, and we want to conquer.
Right.
We want to win that game.
So let's think then about because some of the language of on the ice, you're focused and you're functioning as a unit, and there's this beautiful imagery of sort of coming together as a whole, even transcendent. It has this really powerful feeling. Is it connected to competition and is there something, I think that's not intuitive. You wouldn't put the kind of violence or however we want to describe that desire to really win, whatever, with the kind of wholeness and unity. But do they inform each other at some level?
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that, being the person I am. I don't separate them when I'm thinking about it. I do want to win, even though I'm working against all of these other people and with them at the same time to have this thing that we're calling the game. I want to win. I don't want to just be out there for exercise or something like that. I have that fighting spirit inside me. I hate to lose. I tell you that. I very much hate to lose. And I need that. I can't just go out there and say, oh, may the best team win. Maybe some people can do that, but I can't. I have to have that fighting spirit. Yeah. So it seems like, does it seem like two different things to you, or does it seem like one idea when you're out there playing a sport? Because there's got to be a kind of a you that overcomes, and also a spirit of working together as a team and playing a game and as I said, before, the game really playing you, and you're allowed to be a part of that. But
yeah. I don't know necessarily off the top of my head. It does make me think that the context in which my own sort of performance, or if I'm doing well and I am playing the best that I can play, it requires the game for that to show up. Yeah. So the thing, I've been playing tennis mostly lately, and the idea of, it's very individual, so that's different, but how satisfying it is to perform really well, to hit a really good shot, but that there is it's a conversation that's happening, and there is, you value that other so much as the one who will respond or not respond.
Right.
And I think, in long sort of delightful points where people are responding, there's delight in that whole that is the context in which my sort of competitive spirit can show itself.
Yeah. So does it feel like, so it feels like it's one idea for, that's how I think about it. And I was just thinking when you were talking, the other part of it, particularly with a team sport like that, is that, and you mentioned this earlier, there's the crowd. And if the crowd is cheering, and that's another thing that sort of lifts you above yourself. And you're just like, I made this great save, and everybody was like, yay, and whoa, and you're just like, the level of adrenaline just jumps for you at that point. And so it's that's an individual thing, I think, that comes through as you're feeling the sort of competition. You're also feeling that incredible sense of being on top of your game and doing the best you can possibly do, and seeing people appreciate it, I think, is really important. My experience being on the ice with St. John's students was that they were very much, I don't know, they, for me as a team, seemed just more in tune with the idea of working together as a group than the other teams did. The other teams were very much, individually for themselves. And we were the team that as I said, we were in tune with one another. We heard, we listened. We knew where everybody was on the ice. And so I don't know that any particular book was, something that I would think about and say, it was just like in. Yeah. So I'd really have to think about which book would
show that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go. So much of what we've been talking about, the sort of relationship between working as a group and sort of performing your best individually towards a common goal, really does speak to what we do in the seminar room.
Right.
I mean, I think it's it gets complicated for me because I think about the Meno, which we read freshman year, and the students are faced with Socrates talking about the difference between an heuristic argument and a dialectical argument, and the idea of an argument that is made in a warlike way to sort of vanquish one's conversational opponent versus a dialectical approach, in which we build together towards, in a kind of back and forth way, we work with each other. And in a very sort of superficial way, I think we talk about that with a freshman as the dialectic version is our model. That's what we're doing. We're not in there to be the smartest one in the class or to sort of try to contradict each other. So how do we work together? How do we work that in? What we've been talking about on the ice is this either tension or relationship. How does that show up in the St. John's classroom? I know where the dialectical part, the group part happens, but that individual spirit, the thing about, how does that get incorporated for us, do you think?
An individual spirit of desire to win?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. In conversation. Because when you were talking about the Meno, my first thought was the slave boy. And that, to me, is the kind of competition or conversation that you're having out on the ice with one another, because you're pulling at what I guess Socrates would say is internal to the other person. You're pulling that spirit forward in that other person. And there can be, I don't know if this is kind of competition that we're talking about, but there can be resistance to that, where you don't want to be led in a certain place by another person. And that can cause some real, sort of problems out on the ice if you're not, willing to be led in a certain way, in the way that would work best for the team itself to its goal. So that, when I think about what kind of thinking, or I don't know if it's even thinking, because Socrates says he's just drawing this out of the slave boy. He's not giving him anything, so it's just kind of like this natural. I think it's courage. It's courage that you're pulling out of one another in there, and that may be what's in the conversation in the classroom is a lot like what's happening on the ice, is that we're just making each other more courageous and pulling each other out in a very strong way to be the best that each of us can be. So I don't know if that's kind of where you're thinking about it. Or?
No, that's interesting, and it sort of characterizes this. I don't know. We've said it in different ways, but a kind of desire to be the best that you can be, and sort of show your stuff, and
so that if I allow you, like Socrates gives the slave boy the chance to show his stuff, show what he knows, and if I can allow you to do that, and you bring that out there and shine, and then we can work together to try to figure out, well, how can that be better? How can it be stronger? How can you sort of tether that courage that you're feeling in the classroom, but being able to speak in front of the seminar or something like that. Yeah, I think that's
it's interesting. It's sort of a recharacterization, at least for me, of something like ambition or the individualism, which I think it shows up that way, sometimes. But the idea of either pulling out someone else's courage or experiencing your own courage pulled out of yourself.
Yes.
And that others are making room for that to happen.
Right.
Sort of weaves together that individual impulse or experience of really being the best that you can be with the room that others have made, whether it's in a given play on the ice or the actual rink and the fans, like that room is being created for this possibility of an individual sort of courage showing itself. It makes it less intention or less sort of paradoxical. Well, how do we put together the sort of impulse for competition and winning, and on the other hand, this notion of a kind of inherently group dynamic, a social contract, a working for each other. But it seems to be more complicated than we all sort of come in with a group spirit and we're here to encourage each other. That's true, but I think that the nature of that impulse, like when you have a breakaway or there's something about that is forceful. It's not exactly generous in the moment. It's taking that opportunity. And I think that it's instructive to me about thinking about the classroom, because I think that's has to happen. People have to embody personally the full force of the room that is made for them so that they can say something sort of on their 2 feet, but in the context that it would only be meaningful given that it's in that context.
Right, like the dynamic of when you're doing a Euclid proof and someone just is amazing and you're just watching that skill and they're just line, just wonderful, and you're sitting back and the only thing you want to do at the end of that is just applaud them as a student. Wow, that was incredible. You just sort of took that moment and made it greater than what it was. I think, I could see that in terms of the same dynamic as what we're doing when we're playing. Play is an interesting thing, I think, because it's we think of it's a game, it doesn't matter, but it really is an embodiment of a self, and a self that can become greater through the dynamic of the play, and it's a self that can be kind of a presentation in front of others. It also inspires them to be greater than themselves. I've had amazing math classes. I don't know why I keep thinking of math, but math classes like that, where you just see someone who just does this amazing solo performance at the board, and you're just aghast, and everybody is just, and you walk out of there feeling like this was one of the best classes I've ever had at St. John's. Amazing.
No, that's helpful to me, thinking about that sort of our potential to be better. We're not fixed, so we have ways in which we show up every day, but they're not fixed. We sort of can push those boundaries. We're not only malleable, but just not sort of defined.
Right.
And that idea of play being a place in which that we engage with that aspect of ourselves. And I think you're right, that's really a lot of the delight of it, that I, get on a soccer field or on a tennis court and I don't know what's going to happen. And I know I'm going to push that in me or as a group and see what might arise. But it's the might arise part. It's experiencing the world as something that is not fixed and could go either way. That flexibility seems really important in terms of what we're doing when we're playing. It's sort of obvious, but we're playing with the boundaries of ourselves and what's possible. And it's really satisfying.
Yes, I agree. Very much so, yeah. And I was thinking back to the opening example from War and Peace that you were talking about, and when I think about the opposite side of, oh, is it Alexander? Who's lying on the ground? Andre, sorry.
Yeah.
You've done War and Peace since earlier than I have.
Yeah.
But before that time, when he's running from battalion to battalion and helping and trying to keep the war going and keep it going forward, and you do get a sense of that aspect of play, and also of just the dynamic of being an individual in battle. That kind of goes along with the idea that you're sort of, you are being more than you could possibly be in a classroom like that. You're moving from idea to idea and surging forward bravely and all of that.
Well, I think, the seriousness of play is sort of what is highlighted for me there. There's something really serious about it. It's not just... and thinking about the bodily, sports and bodies, and that we're doing something physically, and comparing that to what we do in the classroom is really interesting. It leaves me with a lot to think about, but I think it's a very useful. And I think that we sometimes separate too much sort of our activity, our philosophical activity, the life of the mind. That what you're doing for me is bringing those together somehow. What happens when we're doing this very physical activity on a sports field, it's not entirely different, and nor is it simply an image for what we're doing in the classroom. It's actually very much related, and that's worth thinking about. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we both just went through a year where we were not in person, and we were teaching online, and I just thought the being back in the classroom this year for me has just been so wonderful, just to be able to have those people present in front of me and see them striving and see them, working at what they're trying to do, and bringing together ideas, and having to encounter one another in a way that they didn't encounter each other last year when we were working on Zoom, when we had all these all faces staring at you on some flat sort of panel, and you were just looking, and you never really got the feeling that this was a group striving together to understand. At least for me, I missed the physical aspect of it.
Yeah.